Hello, everyone. Welcome to In the Growth Space. My name's David McGlennen, and I'm really excited for today's guest and this episode. Let me just, before we get into the episode, though, let me just encourage you, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you go out and hit subscribe on your podcast app. That way you're always notified when we drop a new episode. And if you want to, go out to YouTube and find In the Growth Space, subscribe there as well. We'd be really grateful. And we always want to get our message out more, where we're sharing with leaders how to grow and just stories of growth so that we can continue in our own growth path. And so today I have an amazing guest that you're just going to be delighted to listen to, and we're going to have an amazing conversation. And my guest is Tiza Pyle, and Tiza has worked in a number of different industries. She's been in banking, she's been in higher education, engineering, high technology. Her corporate roles included executive positions in human resources. She had a focus on leadership and organizational development, change management. That's what we're going to get into a lot today, I know. And so I just wanted to bring her on to our podcast here today and just have a great conversation about a number of different topics, but most importantly, her own growth path, because it's a really great story. Tiza, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here, David. And it is a wonderful opportunity to share with others what's possible at any stage of your life. And I think by looking at me, you know, I'm not 20 anymore. So there has been...
Well, and honestly, at about the 20-year-old age mark, you had some major changes happening, right? Talk a little bit about the major change that happened, I think, when you were 20-something years old.
Absolutely. Change has been a huge part of my life. And I think the big change is when I made the decision after having met my husband, who at that point was a graduate student at the University of Chicago. And we decided to get married, and I moved to the U.S. So that was the biggest one. So I am a later day immigrant by myself and spent the early years of my life being a graduate student wife at the University of Chicago and raising kids in Hyde Park, which is a very unique neighborhood in Chicago. So change has been always part of my life, and that has taught me a lot and also allowed me to offer others some ideas in what you can do. Change is going to happen in your life. We change every single day. And I like to say change is inevitable. How you respond to it is your choice. And that's what we're going to talk about, choices that you can have when change encounters you, because it will encounter you.
And I like how you say that. It encounters you, right? You don't encounter it. Oh, my goodness. Well, and you have I know that you have a framework. We'll talk a little bit about the framework for change, but you're no stranger to change. I mean, you talked about a major change moving from Brazil to the United States. I mean, that's a big change for anybody. But then, you know, and I'm sure there are many in between there. But one significant change that I'd love for you to speak about is the change that happened at the beginning of COVID, because you had to almost engage your own change management framework for yourself, right? Talk a little bit about that.
Just to give you a little bit of context, my husband was a space physicist, and he was specialized in cosmic ray research. And we had spent 10 years at the University of Delaware on a very specific grant proposal. When the grant ended, we decided to come back to the Chicagoland area. And I had all the plans. I had some corporate clients. I was traveling extensively, primarily to Brazil, when people could use my language skills with multinationals. So when his health started failing a little bit unexpectedly, and that was a big change. We had planned a type of retirement, and health issues changed that plan. We had to pivot. And one of the things that we decided to do was to look for a retirement community in the area great hospitals in the Chicagoland area in the western suburbs. And in 2019, we moved to this retirement community. One of the reasons for it, David, was that they had what they call respite care. Although we were an independent apartment, not apartment, a townhome, completely independent, there was opportunities to use the assisted living. And I had already set up with him to be there for the 10 days I was going to be in Brazil in a big contract in April of 2020. Now, we know what happened in March of 2020, right?
Yeah, right, right.
It wasn't easy. I remember the day, March 14th, and our community closed out. And so we started changing the situation. So fast forward a few months later, and my husband passed away in May. And I always say he didn't die of COVID. He died because of COVID because he refused to go to the hospital alone. So he took the risk. And so, it, in looking back on those days, he worked the day he passed away suddenly. And
My
that was a
goodness.
blessing because
Sure.
he was active. But for me, all of a sudden, to be alone, my siblings weren't here, my children couldn't come to see me, all of that was the beginning of perhaps the biggest change process that I had to deal with. And I think that happens to many of people. And I was very fortunate, Dave, to have what you talked about, the learn that I have is that my mindset was that I can be successful and I had to learn how to live by myself. And I made my mind up and to create a future for me. And that's what I think as we age and these surprise changes come to us is that we have our own ability to change our mindset and then things is going to start to happen.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well,
And
and you have to. It sounds like too. You had to kind of like I would say reframe your situation because, I mean, look at your partner of 55
I,
years just
yes,
passed
yeah,
away, and
yeah.
so you had to kind of think about, okay, well, what now? And you could have chosen to say, oh, woe is me, but you didn't, and so that reframing comes into play. And I like, have you always had that kind of a mindset? Have you always had that kind of a, just processing?
It's interesting, Dave, because I think I have, and it's partially part of temperament. We all come
Sure.
with
Yeah.
certain hardwired things. I believe that
Yeah.
when people ask me, can people really change? My answer is yes and no. And it's not a helpful one. But
Right.
the no is that we all have hardwired tendencies that we're born with. I'm an extrovert. I'm always talking, hear my hands going.
Right.
Other
I'm with you.
people are quieter. They need to think before they talk. I need to talk to think. And we see the world differently. So we do have preferences that are born into us. But yes, we can change because we can make choices to modify our behaviors in a
Mm,
way that is more effective for us. And that's what I think is so important for me is not right and wrong, not the best, but the effectiveness that you can bring to your life, but looking at things differently. And I think I have always had that ability. And it's
yeah.
interesting, another huge change in my life, David, is that again comes from, your history. I have always been a big woman in the Brazilian culture, which is petite and dainty, I was this, 5'9", very athletic, big
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
And so I created the sense that, with the body size, and I decided to be successful being fat. And I was
Mm,
very overweight for a lot of my life until
mm.
one day, and one of my books tell that story, I realized that if I didn't do something, I was not going to live because that weight all of a sudden started affecting my health. It was not the way I looked. I was successful. I had a great marriage. I had a fabulous job, but all of a sudden was my health. So I made a decision, and in my 60s, I lost 130 pounds.
My goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
I chose
Wow.
the gastric bypass route, and that's when I wrote my first book, Fat
Really?
Hurts. Then, and in there, when I was writing that book, I started, how do I make all these changes? Because they were
Yeah.
happening and I didn't know what happened. And so
Right.
during
Right.
that process of writing that book, I realized that I really had a framework. And I put
Mm,
that framework in a book. A friend of mine said, "Do you know what you have in that book?" It was a paragraph. She said, "This is phenomenal. Why don't you develop it?" So my second edition really
okay.
used this framework. And I call it Believe That You Can Do It,
Yeah.
Know Yourself Through Awareness, Seek the Support You Need. And that's huge, asking for help and knowing what you
Yes.
need. And then
Right.
enact a plan, which I call the base model for change. I have developed that. I have written other books around this, but that is where I believe that if you have a compelling reason to do something that is
Mm,
important enough for you, if you can create a vision of what you need it to be,
mm-hmm.
if you know who you are, because your preferences are going to have an impact in how these decisions go. And
Right.
perhaps one of the difficult things is letting go of the past,
Sure. Sure.
because the
Yeah.
past is what has happened to you that has brought you here, but is not going to move you forward. You
Yes.
honor the past, you don't forget it, but you let
Right.
it go. Otherwise, it can become an anchor. And that's what I
Right.
try to do, is to
Mm,
acknowledge this and move forward. Now, the big one
right.
is ask for help, because that means letting go of control.
Sure.
And letting
Yeah.
go of control is not
It's
easy.
hard. Yes.
It's
Right.
hard.
Right. Yeah.
So understanding your priorities, and especially I think for older people, and I have been practicing this and I have some wonderful stories, is that when somebody says, "Can I help you?" I don't know what happens to others at my age, but the immediate thought is they don't think I can do this.
Oh,
Instead of
sure.
saying they are giving me a gift, they are honoring me.
Yeah.
And so by
That's
saying
another
yes to help
reframing.
is the
It's an,
reframing.
yeah. Right. Right. I love
So
that.
I hope that the reframing that I have done is to look at a situation and say, can I think of this differently? Can I respond to this differently? And again, it's not about right and wrong, it's about effectiveness, and it's about reaching the goals that you want to have for yourself.
Mm. I love that, Tiza. Just as I hear your story, the one thing I want to point out is that you really have been a what they call as an unconscious competent when it comes to change. And I
Yeah.
think what I hear you say that you did when you wrote the book, your first book, is to step back and go like, how did I make these change, and kind of revisit and evaluate based on that reflection. And I think for any leader that's listening to us today, I think that's a really important tool for us to be able to, like, if we go through something and we're successful at it, if we can step back and just reflect on how did we do that? What were the steps that we took? Because sometimes we do things and we don't even realize that we've done them, and it's just been successful. I know one business owner that is super successful in a certain industry, and he just does things, and he doesn't even think about it. And so that unconscious competent kind of comes out, but reflecting on those actions helps us to be able to really be able to almost duplicate it for somebody else, or help somebody else duplicate our success.
Couldn't agree more. And I also think it's part of this process that you're describing is that we tend to forget if something is a skill for us, we think it's easy. And we
Yes,
don't
yes,
stop to say, this is okay for me. How do I teach other? And that has a lot to do in leadership, because as you mentor people, as you help people, as you coach them, you need to understand the process that you go through to get to the outcome so others can duplicate. It comes naturally to you, but may have to be learned in a different way by
yes.
others from a different
Yeah, that's
perspective.
such a good insight. Something struck me too. I I want to go back for a moment because I'll go back into, we'll get into some change management, especially how we bring it into like the business world. But from a personal perspective, I just have to like share with the audience. You just embrace change in a way that I've never seen somebody embrace change, because I remember, and I think it was 2022 when I did the first turning point with Paul Martinelli after COVID and all of that happened, and you came to that event,
Yes.
and I was blown away at your engagement of getting involved, and even going out on the ropes course. I know you didn't go the high ropes course, but you did the ropes course. You did the all of the activities, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Tell the audience a little bit about like what led you to come to Turning Point, because
Okay.
I think that's a great. I just loved it. I loved seeing you there, and you've been back for the past what 3 years I
All
think
of
it's
them.
been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. That's great.
We talked about losing my husband in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. And in 2021, in November, he would have been 80. And my husband
Mm.
loved parties.
Oh,
February of 2022, I turned 80. So between that process of both turning 80 and my being alone and being a landmark, all of that, it was really an extremely difficult year for me. That I went back for some therapy because I knew that depression side of the grief process had hit me full force. Okay, so I
sure.
was in that process. And we have a common friend, Michael Schutz. And
Yes.
Michael was being a great support to me. And he called me and he said, I think there's something that you may want to consider. It's called Turning Point, blah, blah, blah. So I went online and I looked and I said, God's sending me this to me, and sign up. I signed up immediately.
Oh my
2 days
goodness.
later, Michael calls me and said, have you made up your mind? I said, I'm signed, Michael. I'm done.
I've done it. Oh, that's so great.
So here I go. Yeah, I knew you, Dave. And then, of course, I had the issue with the COVID and the ropes course. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes, yes,
I,
yes. Right,
they
right.
they had to write a disclaimer, and there was all kind of mistakes of the disclaimer. So I
Yeah,
reach out and say, David, what is this? So
yeah.
anyway, so I walk in
It was
there.
so
I
great.
didn't know a soul except Michael Schutz. And the first thing Michael does is to go to another member who was the senior person and looks at her and says, guess what? Tiza is older than you are. And
I love it. And
I
Susan
walk in
went,
this
wait.
well-formed group as a complete stranger. And the first thing I do,
You one
and
up
then
somebody.
yeah, and I went, Michael, what are you doing?
I love it.
We have become friends and we share the honor of being the two oldest people in the
That's
community.
so
But
great. That's so great.
it was just now one of the things is that I wanted to experience. I think if you're going to join something, at least experience it in its fullness. And I think that's true for
Yeah,
business and that's true for change as well.
so
So
true. Oh
it was
gosh, that's
just
so
so
good.
fabulous. And the ropes course was really a very interesting experience. And I had something really interesting happen there. One of the things we had to do was to go through a zip line. Of course, I had never done this in my life. So here I go. And I was scared, but I remember the young woman who was our guide. She looked at me and she said, Tiza, you are safe. In the moment I heard those words, you are safe, I let it go and I did the zip line. Okay.
It's
And
amazing.
I
That's
think that that's
amazing.
something for leaders. Are we making people safe in our workplaces?
That's so good, Tiza. Yeah.
What does it mean to be safe in the workplace? What do you mean as a leader to create safety? Demand performance, but at the same time, think about this whole process of change that is happening so fast, and it can be so scary because we don't like change as humans.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Talk a little bit about that in the workplace, because I love that. And I agree wholeheartedly about making the workplace safe and having that safety. Um, how do we do that practically to make sure that we have our workplaces, feel safe?
Emotionally, I think it
Yes.
is to one author in the 80s that really informed a lot of my thinking around personal change is William Bridges. And William Bridges talked about the personal side of change because change happens on the outside and it's
Mm.
noticeable, everybody sees what's going on. But
Mm-hmm.
he presented the theory and thesis of the psychological response to change that he calls transition. And that is hidden. You don't know that's happening. But think about it. A new system comes into your workplace. I just did a work with a client who was installing a complete new system. The person who was the guru on the old system is completely displaced all of a sudden.
Sure, sure.
So,
Yeah,
how is going to be safe in times of change may be to be aware that that person could be having some concerns and be
sure.
careful to say, the new system is coming. We have our plans to train you. And in a nice way, don't worry. We value what you brought, and the new system is just going to help because resistance
Mm,
is normal. So, I think is being
right.
aware that
Okay.
any
Yeah.
change needs to have a clear vision that there is something out there. We need to
Right.
acknowledge that the past has to be gone. It's gone. And then between the vision, the old reality and the new reality, that is what I call the in between stage, which is
Mm-hmm.
really confusing. And
Oh yeah.
that's when the leader, you need to manage that process. So you go from the old into the new as smoothly as possible, because if you're remaining there, it's going to impact your profitability, it's going to impact your productivity,
Right.
everything. So that's when I see this model of helping, having a vision, having a reason. And there's a lot
Yeah.
being read into this, but pay attention into the people just helps you to get to the other side quicker and more
Quicker. Yeah.
effectively.
Oh
So
yeah.
I
I love
think
that.
creating safety in the workplace is understanding that people are going to be rattled, may not be afraid,
Sure.
but definitely rattled by change.
Yeah.
It's interesting, David, because even the changes that you want,
Yeah.
they create the same process. Think about it. The thing you most
Sure.
want is to have a baby, right? Think about a new baby coming into a
Yeah.
life of a couple.
Yeah.
The moment that child is born, the old life is gone,
That's right. It's true.
right?
Oh yeah. Long gone.
Long gone, right? All of a
Yeah.
sudden, you need to create a vision. What are you going to be now? Instead of two, you were three, right? How
Yes.
does that
Right.
mean? In the in between stage can be complicated, that needs to be addressed. Sometimes it is the fear. The new mother has no clue. My God, what am I going to do with this
Yes.
little thing? The
Right.
new father said, do I have a place in this relationship?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
there's even when the change is really moving to a new building for a business, everybody was looking to it, right?
Yeah. Sure.
But the old building has memories and it has to be honored and let go. And we need to
Mm.
create a vision for that. So everything, think about the old, the new, and what you move through this process, and that's where the methodology and the planning, all of that takes place. Does that help,
Yeah.
from
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
thinking?
I love that. Well, and I think what I think is so cool about hearing you share that process of movement is really I mean, the thing that you said before we started recording was that businesses don't change, but people do. People are the ones that change, and so we have to manage and lead the change, and we have to lead them through from where we are, or where we are now to where we want to go. And in order to do that, we have to have a vision for the future. We have to have we're here, and we have to have a vision of there. And
Yeah,
I
up
think
there.
that's what you're saying, being able to manage that. And that in between stage is the part that can be a little bit,
Yeah,
unnerving, let's say.
yeah. I
Yeah.
worked in in my generation, the re-engineering days, remember? Everything
Yeah.
had to be re-engineered in the
Sure.
80s,
Sure.
but
Yes. Yes.
we did a lot. And one of the things, because I was in an HR executive position, working with the leaders, the senior leaders, was talking about it's not about them. We are moving ourselves. So address our response first. You, as an owner of a company, is going through that same transition issue. But you may have more time to adjust to that because you've been planning it. I remember you announce a change to the organization. Oh, they are resisting. Wait a minute. They had no idea what's coming. How did you prepare that change? How was your communication plan taking place? How are you creating way for people to express their fears so they can move into the future and share the vision with you? So I think that's where I help leaders during the process of change, which is something I want to create this tool I'm talking to you, David,
Yeah.
is to look at the people side of change through innovation that is essential for companies and have a really practical how to do this. It's not a book,
Mm,
it's just a tool that you
a
go to
tool.
certain, answer certain questions and move through that process. This is
Yeah.
my current work to help
I
leaders in this process.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about the tool? Like, what does it entail? Talk a little bit about it if you could.
The way I'm looking at the tool right now, that's going to have 10 frameworks, 10 templates. And the
Okay.
templates are going to be initially, what's the change? Why is this change important? How do we want the future to look? So it's going to be really sitting together and putting the thing together. Then the next piece is going to be who is going to be impacted?
Mm,
Who is the epicenter of change and who are the people that are going to be impacted? Perhaps if it is like let us talk about an engineering system, the engineers and the technicians are going to be impacted, but the salespeople are going to be impacted, and the
mm,
clients are going to be impacted. So you have to really analyze how all of that, and that's why this tool is not a book, it's a very specific process that the team go through.
goes
Then
through.
then you
Okay.
go and say who is my champion team? Who do I need to bring together? Because the
Yeah.
leader alone can implement this. And then you do an analysis because in every change process, we're going to have early adopters, people who love
Sure.
it,
Right.
and we're going to have the people that are going to say no to it, and you have to
Hmm.
make some decisions about that. So if you
Yeah.
look into the normal distribution curve, you're going to have the extremes, and then you have the 50% who's
In the
going to
middle.
need
Yeah.
help moving into that direction. So what is the plan for all of those? And then
Yeah.
list, sometimes even list the people, what each one is going to lose and how potentially they're going to, what's the resistant questionnaire. So we go
Okay.
through this and really
Okay.
create an idea very specific to the change and to your population. And then you have your communication plan. How am I
Okay.
going to tell that? And then
Right.
the execution plan. And you have to have the resources. So it's both systems and people that have to work. Cotter has a really good model for change, but
Yeah.
sometimes he didn't address the people side, which I think that's where Bridges created
Mm,
this. So it's a combination of these two processes on something
okay.
using the base model for change. So I'm combining a
Okay.
lot of my experience and hope that managers can, you know, embrace this and help them move faster to the
Mm,
desired outcome.
yeah, that's so good. And who is this model and this tool? Like, who's it designed for? Like, who's the ideal client, company, what have you?
I have worked a lot with major Fortune 100 companies, and I think the tool that I'm thinking about may be better used for smaller companies. My ideal client, if ITs wanted to work, is the owner of a company who's looking at that, who is in a position to make the decisions, is big enough that he can do
Yeah,
that, and then
sure.
bring his management team to do that. That for me, because I think bigger corporations have enough of their own departments that they have already processes. So for me is more the mid-sized company that
Yeah,
you can work more directly with a smaller management team that can have a quicker impact on their business.
yeah,
That's where
yeah,
I'm envisioning the
yeah.
tool. And
Makes
for
sense.
coaches, executive coaches who have access to those individuals who could
Yeah.
use that and be trained, here it is the tool, we can work together. So
Hmm.
that's
Okay.
where I'm looking at it, David, and creating
Yeah.
partnerships. I have
Yeah.
always believed in collaboration and partnerships, as you well know.
Yeah.
So looking
Likewise.
for
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Well, you just spurred a curiosity too in me, just as you talked about, business owners and leaders, I was kind of connecting the dots about how business owners, especially right now, when we're recording this, we have the biggest wave of baby boomers and soon to be Gen Xers that will be either looking at retirement or beginning to, kind of phase out of the workforce. And that's a big change for any business leader. I was just talking to someone this morning about that, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that process that we go through as just individuals, because I know one of the topics that this individual that I was talking with talked about was how hard it is for business owners to let go and to let go of their business or transition it to the next generation of leaders, or even just transition out of their business so that they're less involved. How do you what advice would you give to a business owner who is having that challenge, that difficulty of letting go or really giving and handing off to the next generation?
That is perhaps one of the biggest issues that we find when talking to executives, especially if they are the founders of the company, because all of a sudden they have to let go something that is so important to them. I don't know if I have the best solution, but I think is to be open enough that there is somebody that can do as well as you can if you help them through the process. So it's really stepping up from being the doer to become the mentor and the coach. And that's not easy. So, how do you step? That's the first step. Identify somebody. Sometimes they expect the children to do that. Do the children really want it? And that, I think that's a valid question.
It's a
Or
very
is
valid
there
question.
somebody into your company that probably could take that step? And how do you prepare yourself? I think the biggest fear, and that's something I can share from my own experience, is what do I do if I don't have work?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Because we identify ourselves by what we do. And I love something. We have to learn to be human beings, not human doings. But that's
Yes.
what we are.
Right.
We,
Yeah, so true.
we do. So I think in talking about this is to identify, is there something else besides work that gives you pleasure and satisfaction? And
Hmm.
can you start migrating to doing some of these things more frequently? And could be sports, could be, volunteer, could be all kinds of, you know, there's so many different things. The other thing, David, and again, I can only share my own experience, which was a discovery that I had, because my friends kept saying, "Why are you still working? Why are you still working? You have to retire." I don't believe in retirement. I believe in
Yeah.
reframing and changing activities.
I love it. I love it, Tiza.
Right?
That's
You
awesome.
reframe and you
Yes.
change activities based on your interests and your capabilities as you age.
Yes.
But for me, it was the way that I made connections, especially coming to a country that I didn't know
Mm,
anybody. Everything
yeah.
had been through work. And so it was saying, how can I get connections that are not work related?
Right.
And
Right.
I have a very new experience. It's all of 1 month old, but I have made the decision to move to a fabulous retirement community in the area close to my daughter's home.
Okay.
And it's really a vibrant community. You have to be fully independent to be accepted here. And I'm exercising every day now, David. They have
That's great.
exercise program every single day. And
Great.
today I was just right before there, I went into a group of writers, and the woman who leads it is a very well-known writer, and we're trying to write memoirs to tell our stories to our children. And I'm just discovering this. So there are activities that you can connect to even if it's not work. But that
Yeah.
was my learning, that I had to let go because connections are so important to me. And I only knew how to do this through work. So the
Sure.
reframing around this is helping me move to a different direction. And that may
Yeah.
be to the owner is the letting go, trusting somebody, and finding something that interests him or her that can
Yeah.
fill their lives.
Yeah. It's something that can pull them in a different direction, and
Yeah,
I love that because it's still a vision for their future, but it's just a different vision. What are
different.
they going to do instead of the work? Or, you could even like be easing out, and maybe you're still as an advisor to your business if you want to. But whatever
If you,
that vision
yeah,
is, to have
yeah.
that vision, yeah, that's so important. Wow, that's so good. Well, and as you were talking, something else hit me, and I thought to myself, we started our conversation talking about change, and one of the biggest things that we all face is aging, and that's one of the biggest change, and that process of that business owner letting go is one part of aging, and knowing how to make a decision to do that. And I'm just kind of curious, like, how do we, as people, deal with the change of aging, whether it's in our work, whether it's in our, our activities. I mean, I can speak from my own experience, just knowing that, in my past, I've done a lot of, I exercise, I work out, and I've also had to adjust that as well, because as I've aged, I know that I could hurt myself if I'm doing the same things that I did when I was, 30. Now that I'm 60, I mean, that it, my body doesn't work the same. And so I have to pay attention to that. And that's hard because I don't want to admit that I've changed,
Yeah.
but I have. And so, so I'm curious from your perspective, like, how do you deal with that?
That's when the piece that I call the awareness piece, okay, is just
Yeah.
we are going to make adjustments. I come from a genetic pool of people who live very long lives. So I
Yeah.
know I may
That's great.
stick around for a long time. So
That's great. I love it. I love it. I'm
but
glad.
I also think that all my life I have believed in something that I used to call the 3 E's.
Okay.
No, the 3 M's. It's your mindset, which is the
Yeah.
most important one. I can do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
The other one is your movement. And it doesn't mean
Yeah.
necessary exercise, but get out
Just
from the
move.
chair, walk around, move, get your
Yes.
get your body moving. And the other one is the meals, which is the whole thing around nutrition.
Yeah.
So when you think about your mindset, your movement, and your meals, you can start creating a lifestyle that's going to help your body sustain yourself. The machine is going to wear out. Let us be very
Sure.
open
Sure.
about
Sure.
it. The
Yeah.
machine is
Yeah.
going to wear out. I used to do, a very quick walking mile.
Yeah.
Today I was very proud. I did my mile at 26 minutes. I mean, that when I was in
Yeah.
my 30s would be, what are you thinking, right?
Right. Oh, I know. I know. I'm with you.
Right? 26
You just
minutes
have to
for a mile?
adjust.
You
Yeah.
had to adjust. So that's the whole thing for me. It is just like we're going to adjust, but it's not going to be easy. And again, I talk from somebody who has been healthy, blessedly healthy. I can see the challenges of people who start having some health problems at an earlier age. And that is difficult. That is really something difficult. But it's just accepting what we cannot change. I've read something is when you cannot change something, change how you think about it. So,
Yeah, so good. That's so good. Yeah. Yeah, because when you can't
so
change something, we have to change our mindset around
a
that.
mindset
Yeah.
around to do that because the body is going to show its sign of wear and tear in different ways. But if you can at least make a commitment to yourself to move and to pay attention to what you feed your body, I think you're going to have a better chance to keep it going in better conditions, you know. And
Right.
again, I am blessed that I have had the genes that not everybody has. Like my husband had diabetes, he had a lot of serious things, so he comes from a different gene pool than mine.
Right.
But and he never exercised. The guy was all brains, you know. So there was a
Well, it
choice
sounds like
that
with his work, he must have been really brainy. Very
yes, he
smart.
was a
Yeah.
rocket scientist. So, but he spent
Well,
so much time in his computer. But there was a choice, and I think we need to accept that choices have consequences.
true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I have to add, you're no slouch either. When I talk about, brains, I mean, you have a PhD. And so, we have to recognize it's like two very intelligent people. So you must have been
Thank
quite a
you.
pair.
Yeah, yeah, I was a woman in my own, in my work, and I was the physicist's wife on his work, but we had a lot of good times together. Yes, yeah,
Oh, I'll
we had a
bet.
lot of
I'll
good times
bet.
together. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
No, Dave, talking about my doctorate, okay, uh,
Yeah.
is the fact that when I decided to get married, I was in a path to do advanced degree in Brazil, and I've had a potential to a scholarship in the U.S. and all of that.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I came, and all that stopped. Uh, I did have a master's degree in human resources, you know, and I work. And then one day I said, I'm not going to make. I always wanted to have the doctorate, and I am not going to claim my marriage for this. My grandson, my oldest grandson, attended my PhD graduation.
Really? Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And it was funny because I decided to go, and my younger colleagues, they used to say, how do you do that? I said, write to the dean. And the professors used to say, you cannot answer those things because you remember them, because I was more at the generation of the teachers. But
Teachers,
when
yes.
people say, oh, I'm too old to do, I keep saying, no, you're not. If you have a desire, just go for it. And I think the doctorate has helped me some, but I never did the research that some of my colleagues done. But it was something that was part of what I wanted to do. And I decided I'm not going to blame my marriage for not having that. So
Yeah.
I did it. And
I love
it
that.
has helped open has helped open some doors for me. And
Hmm.
I did it on organization development and leadership development. So I don't go a lot by Dr. Pyle, but
Yeah.
but it's there. But it has
I
helped
love it.
open doors that
Yeah,
otherwise may
sure,
not
sure.
have been open if you didn't have the degree. So
Yeah, right,
anyway,
right. Well,
hope
that's
that
so,
answers your question.
yeah, that's so great. That's so great. Well, there's so much in our conversation that I've just really enjoyed. And I really, I hope the audience gets inspired by you. I'm inspired by you because life is about change, and here in the growth space, that's that space where we get outside of our comfort zone and we grow and we change as human beings, whether that's we're changing ourselves, whether we're changing our companies, our teams, whatever it might be. It always encompasses change. And so I love the fact that you have this model for change that can help us navigate moving through from where we are to where we want to go. And I don't know if there's anything that we missed that we wanted to talk about, but if there is, I'd love to give you kind of the last word. Is there anything that we should have talked about that we didn't?
I think we cover a lot of grounds, and I hope this was helpful for your listeners and for leaders who can see change as possibilities. I think that's what I'd like to leave to people, is that there are possibilities if you set your mind to that. And believe you can do it, know who you are, seek the support, and have a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, it just becomes as a dream. And that
Yes.
is where has helped me, to your point, Dave, become aware that I did have a methodology, but it was not until I stepped back to say, how did I do that, that this whole thing has come and has evolved over the years. I mean, it's been about 10 or 12 years that I've been focusing primarily on the base model for change. But, that's where I do. We can do it if we set our mind to it. I'm delighted that I can still be of support to people like you and be
Yes.
part of the business community in any way I can serve.
Love it, Tiza. It's so great to have you here, and thank you for sharing for just the short time we've been together here today. I'm so inspired by you, and I'm grateful for your contribution to this podcast. I hope you who are listening, are inspired as well, because I think just the things that you shared, change my mindset in a lot of ways, because it's how we look at things, and how and we can change the way we look at things, right? And I just love that. So let me just say thank you, Tiza. Thank you to our audience for being here for this podcast episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And again, if you haven't done so already, go out, subscribe, hit subscribe. Make sure that you rate the podcast. And if you want to give us a little feedback on the episode, let us know what you liked. Let us know what you took away from it. And that would be really, really great. So, Tiza, thank you so much for being here in the growth space. And to all of our listeners, until we meet again, be well.
Thank you so much, Dave. It was a pleasure being here with you. Take care.